Showing you guys today how to Dockerize a PHP application. So just to get started, we have just a demo environment here. This is just a PHP application that echoes hello world. So when we're done deploying everything, you're going to see that on your local browser. Then we just have a generic configuration file. So if you have like a custom config file that you want to use, you can go ahead and just throw that into your application. Basically, if you have any kind of a PHP application, you can deploy it following this method. So to start, you have to make a Docker file, and I'll go ahead and post all this code in the description just for you to use, but I'm going to run through it line by line just so you guys can understand what's going on. So basically what we're doing here is we're grabbing the PHP Docker image from Docker Hub, I believe it is, and it's the 7.4 Apache version. Basically the way it works is that you can Dockerize any PHP application, but this one's going to be for a web server. So what you want to do is this actually provisions a little Linux instance, and then it runs through everything that you want it to do. So you can specify anything you want here. I have some examples for connecting to a database connection, including the modules that you're going to need for your application to work once it's running in Docker. So good rule of thumb is anytime you're going to be Dockerizing anything, you want to run apt get update and then also upgrade, because you're going to be pulling down a vanilla Linux instance, and you want to just upgrade everything and update it so that you can pull anything you need. So here we have run docker php extension install, and then we have a list of modules that we want to add. You can see here that it's MySQLi. You can also do the PDO extension. And so if you know what extensions you need, go ahead and throw those in there as well. And what we're doing here is we're going to add the our app directory, all the information in there, into the Apache web server directory. So that's var www html. So it's going to be going into this folder right here and then grabbing everything and copying it into your Docker image. So then we're also going to copy over that configuration file. So in here you can have your redirect rules and everything that you need in there, and it'll actually copy it over to the application, or to the site. And right here you specify the name of your site. We're not going to use the default site. Generally, good rule of thumb is just to not use that. Down here it's also defined, so be sure to update this as well. Also, so you're able to actually set environment variables when you provision these Docker instances, and this is helpful, especially when you're trying to have multi-container deployments with separate connections. You're making API calls to different domain hosts and all of that kind of stuff. So for here, this was the use case that I had, so I just wanted to throw this in there. We have these Docker containers that are going to be connecting to multiple SQL database connections. So what I'm doing is I'm actually setting an environment variable, or I'm actually like setting up to add an environment variable to what I need. So basically all we're doing here is we're echoing this command, and then this will be passed in when we create our Docker compose file, which I'm going to show you in a little bit. And then these two slashes mean just append the environment configuration file. So you can go ahead and add whatever you want here. Just be sure to name it what you need, and then also give it a good name, usually the same name, so that you can reference it in your Docker compose file. Okay, so and then also down here we have some commands. Basically what we're doing is we're provisioning from the default site, and we're adding this site name that we're going to be using, and that's why we have to update the configuration file site name here. And then we're just going to restart the Apache service, and I'm exposing on port 80 because this application is going to be running behind an application load balancer, and there's no need for me to expose on 443. I just have this on there just to show that it's possible. This is your Docker compose file. We're going to be using this to run the Docker container locally. So here we have just a list of services. This is what YAML looks like. This is how you can basically statically run containers. So rather than having to, use Docker run and specifying your ports and all that, you can just have a file that does it and then just run off of that file. So here we have just a service name. This is used to reference across your file. You can name this absolutely whatever you want. It doesn't matter what you name that. Here we have our image, and it's going to be named my demo PHP image. You can name this also whatever you want. Just make sure that when you're building your image, you're building at that same name, because this is going to be pulling that image that you build later. So for your ports here, on the left side, you can specify whatever port you want to specify. You can do port 8000, you can do 3333, it doesn't matter. I just use port 80 because when you type in localhost, it automatically goes on port 80. This side is where it actually hits the Apache web server service. So just keep in mind on this side, it's going to be port 80 almost always. So you have your list of volumes here. This is helpful if you're not trying to build your image every single time that you make an adjustment or a change. So what this is doing here is this is saying, go into my local directory, go into the app folder, and then specify this as our web server. So similar to how you have in the Dockerfile, where you're building the image, you're doing the same exact thing, but here it's going to run locally no matter what. So we're going to go ahead and remove or comment this out for now, because we're going to be actually running off of our Docker image that we create. You have your environment variables here, and all you have here is the same environment variables that you have specified here. So just make sure you use the same casing and spell it correctly and all that, and then you can just reference whatever you want as the values. So an example would be, an RDS instance, the host name, and then here would be the name of your database, and then the username, and then the password to the database. You can also have stuff like site URL, which is something I named this. All the stuff on this left side, these are all names that you can give. It's just you have to make sure that the references to them are the same value. I was using this specifically because I had, for one instance, a dynamic subdomain routing situation, and I needed this to be dynamic. So I'm just labeling this localhost. It's not getting used in this application. I just wanted to show you that it was possible to do that. And then you can also have network specified, and this is really helpful if you're running a local SQL database instance and you want to connect to it within the same little local Docker network. What you want to do is just go ahead and create a local Docker network and then just specify it as an external network. That way when your Docker Compose runs, it knows that that network doesn't already exist, and it goes ahead and that the network already exists, and then it connects to it. So back over to the terminal, we're in the same directory that we were in VS Code, and we're just going to start by building our Docker image. It's really simple. You just have to run docker build -t, and then we're going to use the image name that I had given it in the Docker Compose file, and we're just going to run that in this directory, which is the dot. Okay, so now you can run your Docker image, and basically we have a Docker Compose file that we had created. I'm going to just go ahead and show that the image was created, running docker image ls, and then I'm just going to grep for that image name because I have a lot of different images. Okay, there we go. So you can see my demo PHP image has been created. So we're going to start by running the Docker image using Docker Compose up. So now it's running. If you want to be able to actually go into the server, you can either open up another terminal, or you can use Docker Compose up -d, and it will actually run it in the background. So now you have your Docker container running in the background. You can choose to, go into it if you would like, or just access it from your local browser. So there we go. There's our hello world text. That was the text that was added to our very basic PHP application. Generally, if you run into any errors, if you have a more complex application, which I'm sure you do, if you're running into any errors saying that you're missing something, you need to more than likely install some additional extensions or update some of your headers or stuff like that. That generally comes up when you're Dockerizing your container. I just wanted to quickly show that you can actually go in to this Docker instance while it's running if you need to do any kind of debugging. So we're just going to run Docker PS, which lists the running Docker applications. And then I'm just going to reference my image because I probably have a couple other ones running right now. Whoops. Okay, so you can go into this Docker container that's currently running by running this command. It's docker exec -it and then the name of the Docker container, which is over here. It's not the name of the image, it's the name of the running container. So we're going to go ahead and paste that there, and then a bash shell. And now we're actually in this running Apache Docker container. So you can see my site.conf and then also the index.php file that we had created. Keep in mind, if you try to edit any of these files, you're not going to be able to, as Nano is not installed. So what you could do to go by this, since this is modifying just a container and not the actual image, you can go ahead and install something. If you want to test something out or debug, you can just update the Docker container and then just run a apt-get install nano, and now you'll be able to edit your file. And then if you want to restart your Docker container, you just have to run docker restart and then your container name, and then it'll rerun it. And go here. There we go. It's updated. And then you can just stop this container by running docker stop and then the name of your container. And then if you want to remove it, it's just docker rm, or you can do docker container rm. It's the same thing. And then it's removed. So now you should know how to Dockerize a simple PHP application. Basically, if you're doing anything a little bit more complex than this, which I'm sure you're going to be doing, there's just additional things that you can do here. This was just a really bare bones method that I was using with some caveats for stuff that I think that you'll be running into, like installing extensions, setting environment variables, doing a custom configuration file, exposing to different ports, doing a custom site rather than the default Apache service, including your Docker Compose with your networks for local development. Just let me know if you need any help with any of this. I'll leave my contact information in the description. I generally like to do this stuff for clients, so feel free to reach out. Thanks.